Tables. Super excited to have you all on. And we have a returning guest, Lester. Yeah, returning guest. Lester, let's kick off with you. Short intro.
Yeah, so I'm Lester Godsey. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Arizona State University. I've been in the role about 11 months. Not to get into too much history, this is my second time around working for ASU. I started my career over 30 years ago at ASU, and I find myself back as their CISO, as my prior gig was the CISO for Maricopa County, where me and my team, we helped the county get through the 2020 and the 2024 elections, among other things. So that's a little of my background.
Yeah, I think which aged you quite a bit, right? I remember in our first...
Yeah, you made comments about my beard. Yeah, that's a direct result of Maricopa County, so yeah.
And we'll link that episode in the show notes. It was a really great episode. And as you had mentioned, we had the former Governor Ducey on. Another great episode we'll link to in the show notes. Matthew, short intro?
Yeah, great to be here and good to be here with you guys. I'm Matt Ledger. I'm the lead analyst at IDC, which is the International Data Corporation. And that's a high-tech market research firm based out of Boston, but we're a global company. And I cover higher education, K-12, and all the amazing technology transformation happening in that space. Been in the role for 5 years, came from higher ed. I was an academic researcher at Harvard Kennedy School. I was also, before that, an administrator working with SUNY Albany in the president's office doing government relations and strategic initiatives. That's also where I got my bachelor's and master's. Been in higher education for about a dozen years or so in all the different seats, basically minus professor. But that's on the to-do list one day.
Oh, see, I was going to ask, is that on the list? It is on the list.
One day, probably adjunct.
Dan, short intro.
Sure. Hey, I'm Dan Kent. Nice to meet you guys. I'm the field CTO for Cloudflare. I've also been with the company just about 11 months, so I'm fairly new to the company. Cloudflare is typically known as a cybersecurity company and application performance company, but we also do a lot with AI and development. And so in my role, my job is to talk with public sector customers to help them understand the new technologies coming out and how Cloudflare can help them integrate those technologies into what they do. I've never been in higher ed myself, but I've got 5 children, 4 which have gone through higher ed, so I feel like that gives me qualifications to be participating in this conversation. But honestly, I've been working with the higher ed customers for about 18 years now.
That was a great intro. Matt, the opening line of your IDC paper is pretty stark. You said institutions have struggled to regain control and execute a more strategic vision. The industry has not yet fully realized the full benefits and potential of this emerging technology. You call up siloed adoption, shadow IT challenges, and aimless experimentation. Walk us through what aimless experimentation actually means. Is it shiny object syndrome with AI? I think you're going with, we need to get back to an actual business problem that we're solving. But hey, you wrote the research paper.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is I just want to make sure that the higher ed folks listening know that that statement isn't necessarily true of all institutions. I know quite a few institutions doing quite incredible things.
One right
with
next
AI.
to you.
One is sitting right next to me.
Try not to take that personally.
I certainly know and see incredible things every day that your institution and many others are doing. But there is a large segment in many parts of higher ed that I've been calling it like the AI Wild West a little bit. And what I mean by that is higher education over the last couple of years has experienced a pretty significant transformation with COVID and the move to online learning, and then ChatGPT came out and AI became a very mainstream thing. We've seen a lot of issues with enrollment challenges and financial pressures that has put higher ed in a position where they're trying to leverage whatever latest and greatest technology they can to rethink how they deliver instruction, rethink how they operate, and do all sorts of amazing things with AI. The challenge that higher ed hasn't solved, and many are working on, but as an industry hasn't solved, is higher ed is famous for 2 things. Being very bureaucratic and siloed functionally, and then also being very distributed and siloed in terms of technology. And when you have those 2 things converge with every vendor in this room throwing AI at you from all different angles, you have different functional users in different areas, testing and experimenting with AI in a bunch of different ways that's not necessarily in line with what the institution's goal is with AI, and they might not necessarily be talking to each other about how they're using AI, and it's not a coordinated thing. So you see this kind of emergence of AI everywhere all the time that everyone's experimenting with in a whole bunch of different ways, and then it's become, for some institutions, this very difficult problem to manage of there's just AI everywhere and I can't control it anymore. And so a lot of institutions I talk to right now are really focused on how do I get this under control, but also invest in this technology strategically and not inhibit innovation or experimentation either. So that's what I mean when I say aimless experimentation. It's like There's a lot going on. It's just not coordinated or strategic from an institutional level.
Except for the institution sitting right next to you, which is so great.
I'm not making sweeping generalizations. I hate those as an analyst.
Yeah, no, totally.
There was a word count limit on that paper, so I couldn't extrapolate. But yes, there's many amazing things happening, but there's lots of also challenges as it relates to managing this stuff as well.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. That very problem is actually probably what prompted ASU to say, hey, we're a leader. Let's launch an Agentic AI and student experience conference. And I'd love to hear a little bit more from both the conference, but also on the cyber side from you.
Absolutely. So the Agentic AI conference was designed to do a lot of what you just described, right? And the focus was Agentic AI and the student experience. And so emphasis on the student learning experience along those lines. But to your point, I don't honestly disagree with, unfortunately, I haven't read the article yet, so that'll be on my to-do. But I don't disagree with what you just said, but at the same time, I think higher education has a responsibility to be innovative and to have that freedom of research and experimentation, if you will. But from a cybersecurity perspective and what ASU, I believe, and I wish as much as I could take credit for, this all occurred before I started, Joe. I inherited a very good situation in that this is a big reason why ASU developed its own AI platform. And so the Create AI platform that I'm sure my counterpart Kyle talked about. But really, it's a walled garden environment. It has its own security, privacy, and ethics controls built in. So the very thing that I'm sure your article points out are things that ASU has thought of. And we've created a platform by which we've had thousands of projects come out of that Create AI builder platform. And we'll soon transition to our agentic framework that we'll be rolling out here very shortly. And so we can do that level of experimentation and investigation and exploration, but with the degree of confidence that we have things well in control and we're protecting those data assets, if you will. So I think we're getting the best of both worlds along those lines. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, our tools range from looking for traditional things like prompt injection, model poisoning, malicious payload development, all the way to looking for risks around harm to others and everything in between. And on top of that, the 50, 60 plus large language models that we support, both open source as well as commercial, every single one of those goes through our internally developed ethical AI engine to look for bias and those sort of things. We've made a large investment in creating that environment that we can be academically free and experiment, but do so in a responsible way.
Higher ed is actually traditionally a great leader. I was just thinking about this with NVIDIA had hit their $5 trillion market cap today. And there was an article from the CEO talking about very early on, 20, 30 years ago, about being very intentional about, hey, like we want to deploy technology and infrastructure to the universities. That's so important and so critical. Obviously it paid off very well. But Dan, I wanted to jump over to you. And on our call, you had said that AI in 2025 is where the cloud was in 2010. Wow, 2010, I can't believe it's already 20. Yeah, what was I doing then? And that we don't have clear definitions yet. Infrastructure folks are talking about compute and GPUs. Software folks are talking about applications and agents. And security folks are talking about governance, but everyone's using the word AI. That's actually been a very common theme of whether that was CIOs going in front of different boards, or some even had to go to the legislature and not using the same language. Everyone's using AI, it means different. And then if we're not properly defining it, people are getting scared and nervous. But I'd love to hear from you, like, how are you defining AI? How are you thinking about it?
Sure, and I think, like I said, it is very much like cloud, right? When we used to talk about cloud, what does that mean? SaaS? Does it mean infrastructure as a service? Does it mean platform as a service? We're in the same boat, right? When we talk about AI, and it's getting better now, you have to have the adjective in front of it, right? Is it agentic AI? Is it generative AI? Or is it the classic AI, whatever you want to call statistical AI? They're all very important parts and they all coexist. And so I think that's the first level of it. Then the second level comes when we talk about large language models, you mentioned, are they open source? Are they commercial? And why does that matter? It matters a lot if you're going to be paying for one and not for the other. It matters a lot in terms of security perspectives. A lot of this is just about getting to the next level of detail, and it would be great that we have the same definitions and standardizations when we do that. From a user perspective, it's dramatically different from a builder perspective. So as a CISO, you care about your users also accessing public chatbots, and how do you protect them from getting wrong information or any type of toxic information coming down? That's different than when you're building your own models or building your own chatbots, and you have to then protect your assets from the environments, the internet. So all that means it just gets complicated until you get to the third level of conversation, until we have some type of standardization. So I know NIST is working on this as they're trying to define cyber profile for AI. I think that'll help, but I think this is also where we are from a maturity phase right now in AI.
Elaborate a little bit on, right now everyone's trying to write rules and regulation, the federal government is doing their thing, the 50 states are doing theirs. What are you hearing from customers today? Where's those biggest security concerns that you're hearing about?
I think that right now, in terms of how do I protect against generative AI, I think we're pretty comfortable there, especially when you go outside of public sector and you go like the finance, they're pretty strong. It's all around agentic AI is the biggest concern. And it's about, and there's a lot of concern with agentic AI in terms of giving agency to a machine to make a decision on your behalf. What does that actually mean? And how do I control it? And how do I authenticate that to the system, especially if my agentic machine might have access to 45 different machines that it can talk with. So that's where the more forward-looking thinking customers are looking at and how to pre-prepared. And I know that was a lot of the conversation last week in ASU, but you still have a lot of, I would say, public sector customers that are just getting their original chatbot out. So there is a spectrum, and it comes down to where are you on that spectrum, and we try to help customers everywhere on the spectrum.
That's great. One more short follow-up. You were there last week at ASU, yeah. What did you glean? What were some of your top takeaways?
You know what? The biggest thing that came out for me was the students. I love that you had students from ASU, you had students from other universities telling what they were doing with AI, and it really shows when you merge the ability to have the AI write your code, how much someone who's not a computer science person can actually write code to actually meet a need that they have. And that was the cool part. I see these 18, 9-year-old, I've got 5 children, I look at it, I'm like, I want one of my children to be up there talking about that, being the geek that is going to be fixing problems of the future and really taking on technology. So that was what interests me a lot. I think that in a whole lot of how do I make education better and how do I make sure agentic AI really doesn't have a negative impact on education. It's complex. How much personalization is good? It's very complex. So it was a great event. Great event.
Matthew, jumping back to your paper, you had a section called Making the Education Experience More Human. We could also rephrase it to making it more student a little bit. So you wrote, AI's most significant promise lies in the ability to extend and enhance human expertise, fostering deeper connections and more personalized support. Students in there. This is the AI optimist view that you were sharing with me. Tell us a story from your research about an institution that's doing this well. They're using AI to make it more human. What does extending that human expertise look like in the real world?
Yeah. So when I say that, first I want to qualify what I mean by how AI can make things more human, right? Because we keep thinking that the bots are taking over and all those things, which is of course not the case. But higher ed has a real amazing opportunity here to make the student experience more human, not less, with AI. And there's 2 ways that's the case. The first is AI, of course, is really great at collecting, analyzing, and pulling together data from all different types of sources on students, of course, within privacy regulations, all those concerns. But it can pull a bunch of data together to help faculty and support staff understand who their students are and what their needs might be. And AI can feed insight to your advisor, to your faculty about what that student needs. And then that advisor or that faculty can help the student better based on the insight that AI generates. So that's the first piece of that. The second point on this is that AI is really good at automating things. So you can take a lot of administrative burden off of the backs of faculty and staff and give them more time to spend with students. And faculty and staff who've been doing administrative work for a long time have to change how they support students to become coaches, guides, advisors in many different ways to them. And AI can give them that time back, but we have to retrain and retool how these support staff and faculty work with students. They're not necessarily trained to be coaches and advisors if they've been an administrator doing some sort of administrative work for so long. So they need to be retrained and set up to be guides and support for students. So those are the 2 primary ways that I see AI making this world more human. We just have to, as an industry, focus on using AI in those ways. Because students do want to interface with humans, right? We keep saying digital natives want to talk to a chatbot instead of a human. There's some cases where that's true, but I think students actually really want to spend more time with their faculty and staff. They just want those interactions to be more meaningful and impactful. They don't want to talk about, oh, what classes do I have to take at this time? Like a student information system, for example, like modern student systems can do that for you. What they want to do is talk to someone about, what do I want to do with my life? How am I going to get there? How am I going to pay for it? And what matters to me as a student? They need someone to help them through those decisions. A lot of students don't have that in their personal life. So that's what I mean when I say that. And IDC works with a bunch of institutions who are really thinking about this. We published a report last year. Actually, I presented on it at EDUCAUSE last year called the Responsive Institution Framework. And there's 8 institutions in there that we listed as case studies that are using using AI effectively to do exactly what I just talked about, right? Put more face-to-face time in the student experience, which is actually what matters. So that's what I mean when I say that.
On that, real quick, you talked about shadow AI also, right? Shadow IT, this is the next version of that. Just a little bit, if you can just comment.
That kind of goes back to your first question about this AI Wild West and all this aimless experimentation. There has been lots of great things happening in terms of how career advisors or academic advisors, financial aid staff, teaching faculty have used AI to support students. But they've all, and I shouldn't say all, many have brought some of these tools maybe on their own. Maybe they found something online that they wanted to use and thought it was great, so they started using it, maybe with or without IT's permission. Again, we see at IDC a lot of early adopters of Agentic AI are encouraging faculty and staff and things to build an agent on their own, and they start doing that, but then there's not this
intentional effort to bring some of those tools into the mainstream of how the institution operates. So there's just these AI tools all over the place, and it creates a shadow AI problem where there's all these tools all over the place that you can't actually manage or keep track of very well, which opens up all sorts of risks, which I'm sure keeps you up at night probably. But that's what I'm talking about when I say shadow AI. Lester, we have the shadow AI piece, and we've got all the devices that are also hooking up on campus. And how is ASU thinking about securing the enterprise? There's just so much being thrown at you right now. I'm just curious, what's the posture or stance around AI? We know it's happening, and I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, so before I really answer that question, I want to go back to your comment about how AI is the equivalent of the cloud back in 2010. And I would say, with minor exceptions, AI and this concept of shadow AI is no different than the concept of shadow cloud versus shadow IT. And a lot of the problems that have plagued the IT industry, regardless of sector, still exist. It's variations on a theme, right? So let's look at the concept of asset management, right? Many organizations have challenges in articulating what assets they have. We've expanded the definition because of the change in technology in terms of what an asset is. And now with Agentic AI, I've recently had a conversation about, okay, are we going to track agents and treat them as an asset in our CMDB? So those are things that exist. So this concept of shadow IT, you're absolutely right. It applies to AI, but this is just a variation on a problem that's existed for decades. So going back to your original question, first and foremost, we've taken the position, some organizations, government agencies, and folks in particular have tried to ban AI, which I think is a fool's errand personally. And so you might as well just call it like it is, right? And so we've doubled down at ASU. We have taken the position that AI is an integral part of learning, period, across the board. So whether you're talking about higher ed, K through 12, this is the new normal. And so we want to incorporate that technology in a way that achieves the greatest outcome for our learners, right? Whether they're degree seeking or exploring the various different non-degree educational opportunities that ASU has to offer. And so my job obviously is to secure that. So from a position perspective, we've taken the approach where we broadly delineate between our on-prem Create AI platform that we developed in-house, and that's where all this sensitive work has to go. And so I'll give a great example of this. So back when DeepSeek became a thing, everybody was freaking out about it, right? Understandably, some organizations, I won't mention who, because we share that knowledge, they outright banned the use of DeepSeek, right? And so ASU was able to take a more nuanced approach where if it's Chinese hosted DeepSeek, yes, you're not allowed to use it for ASU purposes. If you want to use a US instance of that, like AWS hosting DeepSeek, you can't upload sensitive or confidential data, and here are some parameters that you should follow with respect to standing up an instance of DeepSeek on a third-party US provided platform. But if there were legitimate research needs at ASU, like somebody wanted to do research specifically on DeepSeek, as long as they had their dean's approval in mind, that we would use our internally developed platform because we had enough confidence that we could do so in a way that the risk was reduced at a acceptable level across the enterprise, if you will. And so we are fortunate that we're able to have this environment for research-based and other sensitive types of activities based off of the data classification, adhering to our compliance requirements and things. But then ASU has also taken the realistic and pragmatic approach to our earlier example. People are going to use commercial versions of, or use commercial tools out there. So instead, we've provided tools. We just announced earlier this month that we reached an agreement with OpenAI that every single faculty, staff, and student at ASU has access to ChatGPT for EDU. So for example, so there's a use case for all those sort of things, right? And then the last thing I would say is we still have challenges in front of us. So I don't want to give the impression that everything's rock solid. It's changing all the time, whether it's the types of LLMs that come out or things of that sort. And so we are also looking at AI from a cybersecurity perspective to combat AI risks as well. We're going to be kicking off a POC with a vendor to use AI, and in particular leveraging the natural language processing capabilities to automate the classification of structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data, right? Because especially with an organization of our size, it's a fool's errand to try to do that in a manual fashion, right? And so we're looking at that, which if we're successful in doing that, we can then apply that not only to the use of AI and validate before something gets uploaded to a third party or whatever, whether it should be in the first place, but then it also gives us additional capabilities from other areas of cybersecurity.
So Dan, you recently presented to 75 people. I think you said it was like less than 50% had good data governance plans. Back up, what was the overarching theme of the presentation and any kind of the lessons learned that you were sharing?
So it was for public sector customers, not necessarily higher ed, or it was a combination. And this was self-assessed. I did not go in that challenge. And they all raised their hand. I asked the question. So this was about cybersecurity and AI, right? So how do we work that together to build the next generation environment? Everywhere I talk, I ask that question. Are you prepared? Do you have an AI governance strategy? And I always ask right next to that, do you have a data governance strategy? Because without that, especially if you're going to be a builder, you don't have an AI strategy if you don't have a data strategy. So this is how people are feeling, right? They're not prepared. And it makes sense, right? It's still new, especially if you look at public sector, which most public sector customers don't move very fast, right? They're typically not as funded as well, and they don't have a large student body to help with the research, so they struggle there. But that's how they feel. They don't feel like it. I really don't think it's a matter of them doing the wrong thing. It's just a matter of how do they create an agile environment that can prepare them? Because we clearly aren't through innovating here, right? We're still moving, and Agentic AI has some ways to go. So I think it's really about how do you get your ducks in a row for when you are going to be cutting over to some of these tools. And it's funny because when you ask the second question, and this is pretty normal, are you doing AI? Yes. Are you doing Agentic AI? Most of the time, no. What are you doing? Chatbots. And when you find out, hey, we are doing Agentic AI, how many use cases? And it's usually 3 or 4. Obviously, I think ASU is very different because you've invested so much in it, but the general population, it's still very early in the phase. So I think it's not like end of the world, got to do it now. But if you don't get prepared for it, it's coming whether you want it or not. The business is going to bring it in, a mission side, the customer is going to bring it in. So you just have to be prepared, and you do everything you can to get prepared. There's lots of frameworks out there. So it's not like we're lacking frameworks. The question is, which one do you use, or do you look at them all and pick what makes most sense to you? So.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in the words of my friend Ryan Murray, the state CISO in Arizona, double click on that, preparing the data. That's going to be a big one, right? If you've got a bunch of bloat and you scale it, you still got bloat. I'm curious, what are you advising customers on as far as preparing them for Agentic AI? How are you preparing customers?
I'll say, going back to the definitions and understanding, when you look at Salesforce Agentic AI and Microsoft's Agentic AI, those are really, I'll call them closed ecosystems versus more of the mission or business side where you're going to be using third party. That is not part of they don't own the whole system. You're going to be using open source LLMs. You're going to be using MCP tools and things like that. That's different than what you're going to get with Microsoft. Eventually they're going to be using them, but they're trying to make it easy. And in an office type environment, that's great. But in most of the business and mission side, that's probably not going to be the answer. So we have to get the other side going as well. I think the whole idea with Agentic is, we go back to what are you doing today to protect your environment against the cloud? I look at SASE. If you have a great SASE deployment, it's a really good step to building out, at least protecting your environment against AI, right? Because SASE is going to make sure we get controls around DLP, it's going to make sure we have controls around zero trust network access, which you're going to want to put in place with AI from a user perspective. Now, once you're building, that's a different story, right? So when you're starting to build now, I do need to worry about the data, because I'm going to be building AI LLMs or either training them or doing something, and my data therefore is going to be part of that brain. How do I make sure I control that data? And again, I think most places now, they're silos. Every data is silos, and that's fine. When you start to do enterprise stuff, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. But we talk about the data in that sense. But when you talk about agentic AI, it's how do you, and you mentioned it earlier, is it an asset? How do I control it like an asset? Does it have its own identity? How do I make sure it has authorization and accessibility to the various tools it has to have? How am I going to control that? Putting in a good SASE zero trust network access environment today is a good first step to getting into that world, because you're going to have to learn about new tools like AI firewalls, and you're going to have to AI gateways, which we're going to help you build AI applications. But if you don't have the other stuff figured out yet and deployed, you got to go back and do that.
Yeah, and that's going to require a lot of training also. And even right now, I'm trying to keep, I host this podcast, and every day I'm just trying to keep pace with ChatGPT might be trying to inject something and I'm like, oh no, this is not good, because I'm using this stuff all the time. I'm using Claude Code. I've got a bunch of MCP hookup inside that, and that's passing data through.
And I read a study it's about 2 months old now, 22% of attachments into a prompt have sensitive or PII information in there. You got to stop that, right? Because you don't know where that, especially if you don't have an enterprise agreement. If you have an enterprise agreement with the LLM provider, then you got it under control. But if you don't, how do you enforce your users to only use that enterprise agreement when they have access to so many others? So that's the things that we're telling customers about.
That's a really good conversation. So Matthew, one of the last pieces of the paper, and we can't cover it all, but I'm sorry, but
I wish we could.
Yeah, I wish we could. So you talked about declining trust in the value and effectiveness of higher education, which I know you're going to go, Joe, this is what I meant, which includes the growing skepticism about the return on investment and impact of academic degrees. When I was talking with Dan, he had mentioned to me as a parent, it's like questioning the cost of that $200,000 degree. I'm having this conversation with my daughter who's 16, and she's like, I want to go to Amherst. And I looked at the starting price tag is $95,000, and I'm like, you should check out Santa Barbara City College or ASU Online. That's going to be the new option, ASU Online. How should institutions be thinking about AI as a way to really demonstrate value, trust, and offer those skills as they're looking to go into the marketplace?
So, Joe, this is what I meant.
Yeah.
I think, personally, the public narrative about the value of higher education not being there anymore, I think is totally false. And I think there's lots of challenges, and of course, higher ed has to do more to evolve with the times and teach more of the skills that students need to get into the jobs of now and prepare them for the future, which we can't fully anticipate. So there's certainly some challenges. I am an example of someone who actually went to college for a specific area and got a job in that space and is still doing that almost 10 years after getting my master's degree. So like, I'm an example of where that works pretty well. And to this day, higher ed is still the best path to a higher income and better economic mobility. There's nothing else that compares still to this day. So that I will say that first. The second thing is AI has a lot of opportunities, not just to transform how institutions operate or how they teach to students, but also how they prepare students for the future through things like, I'm thinking about Babson College and Patty Patria, who's the CIO over there, and they're doing a lot of great work. Ruben is also their academic innovation officer or something like that. But they're bringing Copilot to not only all of their faculty to embed AI into how they deliver instruction, but they're also putting AI into the hands of all their students, particularly in their entrepreneurship classes. And they're helping students build companies with AI. Right? Or build some sort of product or solution that they've always had in their head as like an idea, and they're showing them, here's how you can bring that to life with AI. And then that's something that students can put on their resumes, that's something they can demonstrate in any sort of interview they might be doing for a job, but also they might just take that business and run with it, which is about as amazing as it gets, right? Like higher ed's not necessarily known for maybe Babson is, but higher ed isn't necessarily known for helping students build businesses, but that's the path forward. AI can help you do that. So it's not just this tool for personalizing learning, which I hate that term. It is actually this tool that you can use to empower students to build things. So that's an example that immediately comes to mind of how institutions are thinking about this. Also, there's tons of ASU's doing amazing things. I'll let you speak to that, but there's also other institutions like Cornell, who's doing AI hackathons, where they're giving students a bunch of AI capabilities and helping and giving them problems to solve and say, go out and solve it and use AI to do it. There's institutions building partnerships with NVIDIA and Microsoft and Oracle and all these companies to build like AI labs on their campus that they can come in and create a sandbox environment for students to play in. That is what all the amazing things I'm seeing higher ed doing with AI. It's not necessarily about how they are leveraging AI, it's how they're putting AI into the hands of their students to learn and create and build things. So I think that's the biggest opportunity higher ed has.
Speaking of entrepreneurship, my daughter's taking an entrepreneurship class, and we built an app on Replit, or Reply as the cool kids call it. Spun up an app, and it also spun up a website. That thing could almost take Stripe payments. Pretty impressive. Now, it started deleting itself. Okay, this is the dark side of this, but I think this is where it's going. Lester, I'd love to hear from the cyber side at ASU how you're thinking about this AI augmented students, that next generation of where you're seeing this go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you're asking this question. So we are in process, fingers crossed, of hiring a student SOC coordinator. So my boss, Lev Gonick, gave me direction as part of our program strategy and roadmap is to stand up a tier 1 student-led SOC. And so I will go out on record and say, under normal circumstance, most people aren't standing up tier 1 level SOC with human beings at this point. They're using automation and agentic AI to replace that first tier of person. And that's the direction that technology is headed, and totally understandable. In our case, because of our charter and the fact we're higher education, we need to educate our students and give them that exposure. But our objective along those lines is to expose them to security orchestration. If we're successful, we'll hire a student SOC coordinator whose role will be to mentor and guide our students through what we're hoping is a year-long journey on learning the skills of being a SOC analyst. But in addition to the standard skills and exposure that you might have an analyst go through, it's our intention to expose them to security orchestration, automated response, and agentic AI, because really that's where the industry is headed. And this kind of goes back to your point, right? Yes, we do want to create a unique learning experience for students where it's appropriate, because everybody learns differently. But at the same time, we are taking at ASU a pragmatic approach about, look, people want jobs. They need to have these skills and they need to be exposed to them. And so our student-led SOC is intended to do that, if you will. And we're looking at leveraging a combination of our own internally developed agentic framework as well as that of the tooling that we have in our cybersecurity portfolio. All those things combined, exposing our students so that they understand how agentic AI works where it's appropriate, but more importantly, where from a cybersecurity perspective, you still need that human in the loop, so to speak, with regards to decision making, because as Ryan Murray, our buddy, knows, it's fundamentally about risk, right? And so there's a place for technology in the form of AI, and then there's still the need for the human element, the creativity, and the dogged persistence, if you will, to protect an organization, especially the size of ASU.
As we round this out, and everyone, this is so great, I love that we're doing this. They're about to take this whole booth down. I'd love to hear just one kind of lesson or non-obvious insight around AI and cybersecurity that you would leave for leaders that range across higher education, state and local government, K-12, and we can kick off with you, Matt.
It's a good question. I think not a lot of people in higher education yet are realizing how they can leverage AI to enhance security across their entire organization. So they think about AI as this thing they have to protect against, but it's also this tool that you can use to protect against the things you're trying to protect against, right? And so now I envision like Star Wars of who's got the best AI. That's what I think is happening in cyberspace right now. But I think AI is actually an incredible tool that we can use to enhance security as well, not just this thing we have to protect against. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I have for higher ed in particular, is it's a tool as well, not just something that's a risk to you.
For my case, it goes back to an earlier comment. I think not too many organizations are thinking about the operational ramifications of AI. And so what I mean by that is it's very common in the cybersecurity field to do tabletop exercises. More often than not, they're around ransomware or maybe DDoS or whatever the case is. We're conducting a tabletop exercise next week. So by the time your listeners see this, we'll have already completed this. We're conducting a tabletop exercise to ensure that the organization at ASU is ready from an operational perspective to address threats from the use of AI as it relates to security and privacy. And if you're going to adopt the technology, I would encourage organizations to start thinking about how is your organization ready and how would they respond to security and privacy concerns that come up as a result of the use of AI. And so I think that's something that not too many people are thinking about.
Dan, take us home.
All right, so I'm going to pivot from this conversation. I've just read 2 books, Co-Intelligence by Ethan Malik and Scary Smart by Mo Gaudet. And I think the 2 are, everybody should read the 2. But from a university perspective, I think what students should be learning and be prepared for 2 things. One is we have to work with AI. It's going to make us more productive. It might replace some roles, but we'll figure out how to add other roles to do something with it. And that's great. I think everyone knows that. But if you look at how AI is going to be impacting our future and the human future, you have to take a step higher and think about what it actually can do. It is the only technology that's goal is to help augment the brain, not the musculature, not the bones. And that's a big difference.
Is there going to be like a blooper reel that?
Those are my favorite. I'm going to do that for sure.
So the last comment is we make AI. The students of today are the ones that are going to be making AI as intelligent as it's going to be. So I believe every student has to understand AI from a bias perspective, from an ethical perspective, because they are going to control the destiny of how impactful AI is on the human race.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables. And there was a lot of resources I will link in the show notes. I appreciate you all coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.